Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Paranormal on a fabulous Tuesday morning. I know it's cooler here in Florida, so I'm hoping everybody up north is staying warm, and you guys are enjoying your December so far. Sorry for the late delay. Of course, the maintenance guy decides to show up 5 minutes before I'm supposed to go live, but hey, it happens. But I am super excited to be joined by a special guest. I've been wanting to get her on the show for a while, and we finally got our schedules to work out, so I am super excited to welcome Alex to the show. Welcome, Alex. Thank you for joining me today and taking time out of your day.
Yeah, Heather, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, and exactly. One thing I always start off all my shows with is take a moment to introduce yourself and then also let our guests know exactly what got you involved in the paranormal.
Yeah, so I'm a paranormal researcher investigator. I've been doing this for I guess you could say seriously or in an organized manner since 2011, when I started my team, the Association of Paranormal Study. And really, this actually ties into my whole origin story, I like to say, is I had experiences when I was younger. As most of us do. It's not the most original thing, but I had experiences when I was a kid. And then I had a really concerning experience when I was about 19, 20 years old. And at that time, and this was 2006, the paranormal community that we know today did not exist back in 2006. So trying to find help with this issue that I was having was extraordinarily difficult. And so I really started my team to kind of be that answer to that gap, to that missing link in my community of, I wanted to be a resource for my community. I wanted to help my community with their paranormal issues. And then from there, I just kind of stemmed into, deep diving into research. I put out my first book in 2014. I started the spooky stuff in 2020 as my pandemic project. That kind of stuck. And yeah, I still have my team. I still do the spooky stuff. I still write. Yeah, and I've just kind of been doing the things since then.
Yeah. And I know when you and I first met, it was when the pandemic was starting. I know I had seen you on Facebook doing different things here and there. And but when we were on Ghost Education 101 in the beginning together, it was always nice to hear from different points of views. And it was one of those things where I was actually, I don't want to really use the term starstruck, but I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm on a panel with Alex because I had been watching you from behind the scenes for so long that it was really interesting. And I'm just really glad that you do take the time to help educate others, because your spooky stuff blog, I go to it as a reference quite often.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad it's helpful.
I'm always using it. And then of course you have some entertaining blogs on there too. So it's, it's a source of a lot of great information. So thank you for continuing to do all that.
Oh, thanks for reading it.
Yeah. And then it's funny too, when you were talking about in 2004, there was no help and all of that stuff. And I'm like sitting here thinking, I'm like, crap, I'm old, because I'm thinking back to 1987 when I had my first experience and I had to go to the library.
Nice.
We didn't have the internet.
So I had that interest too, like, in the 90s, the baby stages of the internet. So, I mean, I was in like the Yahoo message boards, the Yahoo chats, ASL, and, age, sex, location, that for the younger ones who don't know. I am floored to this day that I did not get abducted. Or, so so it was like baby stages, with like GeoCities website. And actually I think the Warrens website was one of the first like paranormal websites I ever went to, and I was terrified. It was so scary back then.
And it's funny too, because in this field, even though you want to, educate, and like my goal is to not make people afraid. in
Mhm.
addition to making this more scientific.
Yeah.
But back in the day, it was like you said, the websites, they created them to be scary and, spooky. And it's like,
Mhm.
that to me, I mean, granted, it's what people wanted to see. So of course they're
Yeah.
going to, you build it, they're going to come, type of thing. But it
So
really
true.
needs to be more educational. So what are your thoughts and what do you have planned to help educate people in the field?
Yeah, so really I'm trying to, at least with like my blog and my books and even just like my presence on mainstream social media like YouTube and TikTok,
Mhm,
I'm really trying to push back on like the I always joke that these some of the and no offense to these creators at all, but a lot of
mhm,
them look like Rembrandt paintings when in their thumbnails, like that face. I'm really trying to push back against the stigma of anything that goes bump in the night or anything that you can't see
mhm,
is out there to hurt you, and it's scary.
mhm,
Now sometimes it can be startling, as I say, even when I go on investigations to this day, depending on where I'm at, I may feel a little nervous, but
mhm. Yeah.
it's just the possibility of not knowing. It's the ambiguity that's scary.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I'm really trying to push back on, and also and I'm also trying to push back in a loving, friendly way that you don't have to like dress in all black every day and be goth or
Mhm.
look a certain way to enjoy the field either. I mean, I'm taking pictures in cut up jeans and flannel shirts, in cemeteries, like saying, "Hey, I'm
Right.
here." You know,
Mhm.
um, really trying to not push against, but just show that anybody can enjoy and experience the paranormal. You don't have to be like part of a niche, because
Mhm.
everybody has paranormal experiences.
Right.
Not just like spooky people.
Mhm.
I like to say I'm a spooky person, but that's because I'm going out looking for it. But people from all walks of life can have experiences and can enjoy the paranormal, and ultimately just remind people that for the most part, at least the way that we define a ghost and a spirit in society today, these are people. They're people
Mhm.
like you and me.
Yep.
Um, they're people just like you and me. They have faults, they have passions, they may have been nice, they may have not been so nice in life. It's just like dealing with a brand new neighbor you just met. Uh,
Mhm.
or if you are frequenting a location, it's like seeing an old friend.
Right.
Um, yeah, so really, I mean, it's it's one of those things that I really want to advocate, like inclusion for everybody. Like there's a seat at
Mhm.
the table for you in the paranormal.
Right.
Uh, doesn't matter what clothes you wear, doesn't matter like what you look like or what you're into.
Mhm.
Some of my favorite people that I meet in the field are, um, like, oh, hey, I'm a rocket scientist during by day, and then at night I'm using quantum physics in my investigating.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh my god, I want to be your best friend. Um, you know,
Yep. And I mean, for me personally, that's what this field needs. I mean, I truly do believe that there is a place for everyone, but not everyone can handle the residential cases.
oh no,
You got to categorize them and you got to know your limits too. I mean, if you know you can go in and test for quantum physics and try to get answers to the afterlife, then that's your area. If you just want to, I call them weekend warriors. I know other
mhm,
people call them thrill seekers. If you just want to go and have the experience, go have at it.
yep.
But make sure you have the education and the experience to help a client and not go in and with your gadgets and like make it worse.
Yeah, I think that's where I think self-identifying needs I
Mhm.
think we do need to push more for that,
Yeah.
especially in the social media sense of like, hey, this is for entertainment purposes only.
Mhm.
And I know the UK, I think, has a law about that,
Right.
like especially with their programming, like
Mhm.
this is for entertainment. I think we could use that at least in the United States,
Mhm.
because I mean, I know some amazing researchers who are great content creators, but not every content creator is a great researcher.
Right.
So,
Yep.
um, I know that's a point of contrition for a lot of like at least a lot of creators that I know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so I put it that way. I know some researchers who are amazing content creators like Becky Ann Galantine
Mhm.
is incredible. I love her work because she does like the research
Mhm.
and she does the work behind it and she makes great content. So she's really
Right.
talented with that. But I've also run into some content creators who who are not so great at research, but they're trying to
Mhm.
sell themselves as serious researchers. And that holds weight. That holds weight,
Mhm.
especially when they start making claims that are unsubstantiated, like, oh,
Right.
there's an evil spirit at this asylum. And then 2 weeks later, someone's trying to set the asylum on fire because their favorite content creator said that there were demons in the building.
Mhm. Yeah.
And or what's worse is if someone is saying, like, an established content creator saying, oh, this person's possessed, when they're actually suffering from a mental health issue. A person with
Mhm.
that mental health issue can say, oh, I don't have to take my meds anymore, I know it's a demon, and then they harm themselves.
Right.
So I think self-identifying, not necessarily labels, but self-identifying strengths and limitations, I think is
Mhm.
important.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I tell people, like, I'm happy to assess, but I am not a mental health specialist. I will bring in someone who's a mental health specialist.
Mhm. Exactly.
I'm a researcher. If there's an area that I'm not familiar with, I bring in people. So a lot of
Mhm.
times it's less me like trying to solve the issue versus I'm going to connect you with people who can help you.
Mhm. Yep.
Like, I'm not like, and I'm not a demonologist either, but I know a couple of demonologists that I can call,
Mhm.
with a situation that I'm like, I think this is out of my scope of talent. And I think we need this, at least in the community, we need to make it more okay to admit that.
Mhm.
Hey, you know what? This is out of my scope. Let's see who we can bring in to help you.
Right.
And I've been doing that since I started my team. Like, a lot of times, like I said, I kind of turn into more of like the networking person and the bridge to
Mhm.
bring
Yep.
people together to help a client.
Mhm. Yeah, it's almost like being a general practitioner in medicine today. You know
Mm,
the basics, but you have all these areas of specialty that you can refer
yep.
your client
That's
out to.
That's exactly it. That's exactly
Mhm.
it. So, like, when my doctor found out I had diabetes and
Mhm.
my blood work didn't quite come out to, oh yeah, you're type 2. She was like, "You know what? I'm going to get you an endocrinologist."
Yep.
So that's exactly what it is.
Yep. And it's funny because I remember back in the day, this is dating myself again, where you went to your general practitioner for everything. And
Mhm.
then now
Oh
today
my
you just
gosh.
go to him and he's like, okay, for I have a kidney doctor, I have a knee doctor, I have a blood pressure doctor. And it's
Yep.
like a different doctor for everything. And that's almost kind of like what the paranormal field is like now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and it's great. It's really
Mhm.
great that we have
Yeah.
that now. And a lot of times I'll follow these other people with more
Mhm.
specialized skills or knowledge,
Yep.
like Ron and Lourdes. I love what
Mhm.
they do with
Yep.
with their work. I mean, and I'm not like super knowledgeable about that area. I mean, I know like basics, but I don't do what they
Mhm.
do, so I will follow them, and I
Right.
will watch their work, and I will
Mhm.
attend their sessions and learn. Like, we
Mhm.
can learn a lot from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And going on that aspect is what are your thoughts on educating? Because I have a lot of people who I put a post up on my Facebook page, I want to say about 3 months ago, that said,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts about getting educated in the paranormal field? And out of over 1,000 comments, 95% of them were, you don't need to be educated in this field because if you have it, you have it.
No, that's for me, absolutely. You need to be educated. So,
Mhm.
some of the most talented people, and the people, and I'll say this: the people who are able to, who have
Mhm.
perseverance, and who have stuck around this field longer than others,
Mhm.
have gotten an education.
Yep.
They've taken classes. I mean,
Mhm.
Lloyd Auerbach,
Yep.
some of the more notable names that I can think of, have gone to some sort of school, or they've,
Mhm.
even if it's just like a class that a paranormal team is offering, that's still, you're learning that person's,
Yep.
background and expertise. Um, I mean, I took classes before especially if you're going to work with the public,
Mhm.
you need to take some sort of like
Yep.
classes in, it's just so you like, especially if you're going to speak on, like, especially the technology, like, you know,
Mhm.
I I believe that every paranormal investigator needs, you got my soapbox out. Um I believe that every paranormal investigator needs to, at the very least, take a photography class, a
Mhm.
videography class, and some sort of audio engineering class.
Mhm.
There's a lot of free resources to take advantage of that. And also just, and also working with the public, basic, maybe mental health 101 on how to identify, is this person in a crisis versus there may be a ghost there.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, it kind of brings me into that whole, like, there's no experts in the paranormal. That
Right.
statement drives me nuts because
Okay. At least I'm not the only one.
no, it drives me nuts,
Yes.
because it's not that there's no experts in the paranormal, but we have experts in other specialties in the
Mhm.
paranormal.
Right.
So, like, if someone posts a picture of an orb, a photographer could chime in and say, "Hey, I know I can see here that it's a bug, and here's the
Mhm.
reasons why." Um, or same thing with video,
Mhm.
or when we're listening to audio and audio pareidolia, which is, that is a thing.
Mhm. Yep.
Pareidolia is not just visual, it's also auditorial, and it's actually sense-wise touch as well.
Mhm.
Because your body's trying to make sense of what it's seeing, what it's feeling.
Right.
Um, but then there's people who know about this, and we need
Mhm.
to listen to them. We need to listen to them. Um, but yeah, no, absolutely. You need I my team does not really go out into the field, or until at least I vet their background
Mhm.
and I know that they're safe to be around.
Right.
Meaning, like, they're not going to get hurt. They're not going to hurt other people. They're not going to hurt the location.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, yes, it is. It is. I don't even like to call it a pseudoscience. I mean, it is a field that is very accessible to people. I mean,
Mhm.
anybody can go out on a ghost hunt.
Yep.
Anybody can do that, but not everybody knows how to do historical research. Not everybody knows, like, how to engage a spirit.
Mhm.
Um, because once you start getting a response, what's the next step?
Yep.
What kind of
Exactly.
questions do you ask? How do you log that with your data? How do you keep track of this? How do you do follow up?
Mhm.
There's just and that's one thing that makes me sad in the field, about the field too sometimes, is, oh, you don't need an education, um or it's just field experience. What about people who can't have who aren't able to get field experience? What
Mhm.
if you have
Right.
someone who has a physical disability, who can't go out? They
Mhm.
still have strengths in paranormal research, but research also takes a certain amount of skill. um I mean, I run into similar things in the theater community, because, I can go get my MFA, I can get a PhD in theater, but then I can never make it on I may never make it on Broadway. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm here right now, so I
Right.
haven't made it on Broadway. But then somebody could walk in who's never had any sort of theater training. They walked into an audition, they land the
Yep.
role. But that's natural talent.
Mhm.
That's natural
Yeah.
talent. That's been, in that context, very rare. There are some people who are naturally talented in this world, in this field, but that's not everybody.
Mhm.
Not everybody has that natural talent. Some people have to learn. I I had to learn. I had to
Mhm.
learn, and even some of the more naturally talented people I've met, they've had to learn.
Mhm.
So I don't know. And there's so many, and there's so many areas of this field. You have the science, you have research, you have historical research, you have tech.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, you don't learn how a K2 works by just looking at it and using it.
Yeah.
People
I
have to
always
go to
tell people,
training.
read the manual and learn how it works in the real world
Yeah.
before you use it on a paranormal investigation.
Exactly, exactly. So I just get really sad when people say, like, you don't need an education to be a part of the
Yeah.
field. It's because it's technically true, but it's like, okay, then in that case, what kind of person are you in this field? Are you,
Right.
in your case, what you mentioned, are you a weekend warrior? If you're
Mhm.
a weekend warrior, maybe you don't need the education. But if you want
Mhm.
to write a book, if you want to get on TV, if you want coverage by the local press, yeah, you might need some additional
Right.
assistance.
Yeah, no, I remember it was last summer. I had someone who messaged me after one of the shows that I was on, just wanting
Mhm.
to know more about where I went to school and what my experience was. And I probably spent 2 or 3 days messaging back and forth with this person. And then they finally ended the conversation with, "Well, thank you for your time and your information, but I don't feel I need to do what you did to ghost hunt." And my response was very polite. I'm like, "Well, that's the difference. You're a ghost hunter. I'm a researcher."
Boom.
Because I actually waited a day before I responded because I'm like, how do I
Good.
respond to this and not sound snarky?
Right. Yeah, that's what makes it, and that's where that, like I mentioned earlier, that line
Mhm.
between, like, because people see some major content creators with millions of followers who
Yeah.
probably didn't take any sort of classes or read
Mhm.
anything, and they see that level of success. And this is what I tell people, because this is because I've had people with bigger followings tell me that they know more than me in the paranormal because they have a bigger following. And this is what I say to them. I say, you having a bigger following has nothing to do with your knowledge in the paranormal. It means you are good at marketing.
Mhm.
It means you're good at knowing how to sell a brand,
Right.
and that brand just happens to be you.
Mhm.
And that, again, takes education. That takes learning.
Right.
um,
Exactly.
it's learning. I work in the field of learning, so I mean, I can speak on this with
Mhm.
with some authority.
Right.
I work in learning experience design for a major corporation. Um, and so adult learning, especially
Mhm.
adult learning theories, is my specialty.
Yeah.
I That's my job. I have to know how people absorb information. Um, but yeah, so just because somebody has a million followers and is moderately successful, that doesn't mean they know anything about the paranormal. That means
Right.
they know how to edit video and they know how to
Mhm.
market. That's it.
Right. Yeah, and I always joke with people because I'm not in it for the numbers. I do this, if you come across my video and you like it, great. If you don't, that's
Hmm.
fine too. And we've been watching my numbers recently, so somewhere along the line, someone shared one of my videos and it like
Oh,
took off.
nice. Oh,
But up
good.
until a month ago, I only had 14 YouTube followers, and I was happy with that.
Hmm.
I was like, I'm not in it for the numbers. I'm just, I just do my own thing, and if people
Hmm.
see it, they see it, and
Yeah, that's kind of been me with my, especially with my YouTube channel and my TikTok content. And then again, sometimes it just takes that one thing to take
Mhm.
off, and then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, hey, people are actually like watching me and liking, and this is amazing." And um yeah, and honestly, I will say, like, doing it the way that you and I are doing it, like, you end up cultivating a really dedicated group, a
Right.
really dedicated group of
Mhm.
followers. Um, and it's nice. It's nice
Mhm.
because,
Yeah.
and you also know that you're attracting the people who align with your values too.
Mhm. Yep.
On the platform I'm on with the biggest following I have, sometimes I don't quite mesh with that with everybody because
Mhm.
I went viral over a video that wasn't actually my normal content, but it was spooky and it
Mhm.
was creepy. And then people see my other content, they're like, wait, what is this? But then the ones that stick around, then it's like, oh, now because of you, I'm, doing more critical thinking when I look at these videos now. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yes, it's like
Exactly.
that's what I want. That's what I want.
Mhm.
I just want people to, look at the paranormal the way that I do, in a sense, I
Right.
guess.
Yep. Yeah, and it's all about, like we've been talking about, education and bringing our information to a platform where people can access it.
Hmm.
Because this field, the one thing that drives me crazy is when we lived in Vegas, there
Yeah.
was several groups we encountered that were like, we're the one and only team to investigate here. No, you can't see our evidence. No, you can't get the contact information to investigate here.
Yeah.
And it's like, what pops in my head is, first of all, is the field's never going to move forward if you don't share.
Yep.
And two is you just don't want us to disprove what you found or what you're claiming to find.
That's yeah. In North Carolina, where I used to live, there's a
Mhm.
bit of that happening now, and I'll probably get in trouble for speaking on it. But I live in Virginia now, DC. It's okay. I'll just hop over to Maryland. Um, but yeah, but that is a thing. I have an issue with exclusive contracts, in the sense of, if you're not allowing other groups to experience that location, even if it's just like okay, we'll let one person on your team come with,
Mhm.
and you're not really again sharing a lot of your data. It turns into more of like, oh, it's like a marketing thing instead of a
Mhm.
research thing.
Right.
um which there's a lot of that in this field. I mean, that's where this field can be so competitive. Like, sometimes I feel bad if I go to a location, I didn't take a photo of myself. It's like, well, how am I going to
Mhm.
prove that I was here?
Right.
And then if I take a photo of myself, do I have the right filters? And, am I marketing myself
Did I put my
properly?
makeup on today?
Did I put my makeup on? Gosh, I can't see. And I'm somebody that investigates in like leggings, lounge pants, sweatshirts,
Mhm.
tennis shoes. I'm not like dressed up when I go anywhere. Like
Right.
most of the time, my hair's in a ponytail. Depending
Mhm.
on the location, I may even be wearing pajamas, you know, if it's not too dusty and dirty. But yeah, it's and yeah. So I'm kind of informal in that way, but yeah, just the and it's a competition of like, well, how many locations can we get just with us?
Mhm. Right.
And then it's like, well, what are you doing to move the research field forward?
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
like even if it's just like an ongoing observation, like what kind of fruit are you producing? And that's really what I look at with anything. It's like, what kind of
Mhm.
fruit are they producing? That's like the one
Yeah.
biblical thing I'll ever reference because it's
Right.
true.
Yeah.
It's like, because some of the most interesting things that I've read have been, um, like the studies from Borley Rectory or um,
Mhm.
uh, Chillingham, where it's just literally like day 3, heard footsteps going down the hallway. Day 4, it was a mouse, but those are like the most interesting things for me to read. But that
Right.
pushes the field forward in some
Mhm.
sense because it's giving us more information on how we can learn about this phenomena. And
Mhm.
with these
Yeah.
exclusive contracts, I feel like they're not really moving it forward. It's just more of like, hey,
Mhm.
how can we look good? And if I'm
Right.
wrong, I'm open to being wrong, but I feel like it's just being used for self promotion,
Mhm.
especially around Halloween time. So.
Right. Yeah. And they look good because, we're the one and only team to investigate here. And, I
Mhm.
completely agree with you. And we actually have one location that the former team that I was on out in Vegas, we were invited, and only 3 of the investigators on our entire team were invited because we were filming for Discovery.
Oh, okay, okay.
And it was just before, I mean, like the February before COVID shut everything down. So it was like right there on that brink of all of that happening. So they invited the 3 of us up. And after we filmed, the guy decided, he's like, yes, I agree with you guys. It's haunted, but I can't for safety reasons because it was underground mines.
Mhm.
So for safety reasons, he couldn't allow any more investigators in. So I always feel bad saying, hey, we were the one and only team to come in there, but
Mhm.
it's not for any of the reasons why these other teams
And
have
that
that.
makes
It
sense.
was it was shut down.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, that place. Oh my God, I wish I hadn't shut down because the place was nonstop for 4 days from the day we got there to the time we left,
Mhm.
and that was a lot of fun. So,
Yeah.
and that's actually one of my favorite places I've ever investigated. What would be your favorite place that you've investigated?
Mm. I guess it would have to be the Trivette Clinic in Hamptonville, North Carolina, and it was such a favorite. I wrote a book about it. Um, it's a really special location, and it's this little hospital. Well, it used to be a clinic in rural North Carolina, in Hamptonville,
Mhm.
North Carolina, and it was built in 1932. The doctor who built it passed away in 1938. After that, it became a supper club in the basement, and then a detox clinic on the main floor. uh you know which that was a kind of a smart business plan.
Mhm.
And then it became a nursing home in a few iterations before it was a private residence. And the place is reported to be haunted by over 70 ghosts. I would say the claim's not totally exaggerated because it seems like this is a location that, I don't want to say collects spirits, like, ooh, it's a ghost collector, but it's a very homey, comfortable place. Um, it's a very homey and comfortable place where I think maybe, well, people and spirits find it to be home, be like
Mhm.
home. So I think that's the reason why. And then I also have a theory that maybe some of these spirits are egregores or thought forms,
Yep.
because a lot of mediums will come in with like similar readings, but then they'll name them differently. And then it kind of becomes part of the story. And then
Mhm.
those stories get told. So I do have some theories that perhaps maybe the Trevette Clinic is haunted by egregores. That's a whole like
Mhm.
other thing for, a whole other topic for
I was
another
gonna say
time.
that's a whole nother show.
That's a whole other show. Um, and I'm a big fan of the Philip experiment. If you
Oh,
can't tell, um,
yes. I've done lots of I actually talk about it in one of my presentations.
oh, nice, nice. I
Yeah.
actually got to see and touch one of the tables that was used for the Philip
Ooh.
experiment. Yeah, that was cool. I was geeking out, and I
Mhm.
got to do a séance on that table with Rosemary Ellen Guiley.
Oh,
I got to
yes.
do a table tipping session. So, paranormal bucket list, like 5 things got signed off that day. And that's something I will always like humble brag about.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that's probably one of my favorite places. And it's honestly an ongoing research project for me. I haven't been back in about a year because, after moving to Northern Virginia, it makes it a little
Mhm.
hard to go down to North Carolina
Yeah.
sometimes. But I would say that's definitely one of my favorites.
Mhm. Cool, cool. And one thing that I had thought of while you were talking before we get to move on to the books that you've written and your projects that you have going on is when it comes to a haunted location. We've actually been to several locations, whether it's hosting an event or offering tours or even just going as,
Mhm.
guests to have fun. One of the rules some of these locations have is do not cross spirits over. They need to stay
Oh,
here.
yeah.
But I personally feel we're here for the spirit, like you said, the spirits and the humans. What are your thoughts on those rules that these places put in place?
I'm not a fan for one, but also it's like, how do they enforce that? Like like how I guess, I almost feel like as somebody who has a very limited knowledge of law, I did work for a police department for a very brief period of time in my
Mhm,
career. But so, and I watch a lot of Law and Order, but um, but yeah, for me, it's like my initial thought is like, how do you enforce that?
right.
Because even if it's like, well, we caught you on video doing crossing a spirit over. It's like, okay, prove it. Prove that I crossed them over.
Mhm, yeah,
And then that opens up that ugly case of, well, now we have to prove that spirits exist
mhm,
in some sort of like substantial way. Um, so that's my technical petty response to that. It's like, well, how would you
mhm,
prove it? But the
right.
other side of it, though, I have an issue with, like, to me, we have free will. We should be able to have the ability to consent to things that are done to us.
Mhm,
Um, and in this case, if you're not allowed to cross spirits over, one, I don't believe in forcing spirits to cross over, but if there's a
mhm,
spirit in distress that clearly needs to do something to that extent,
right.
who are you to say that they're not allowed to do that?
Mhm,
You know, I feel like that's building up some really bad karma for the location owner, for
yeah,
one. Because in that case, you're holding people hostage,
right.
so that you can make a buck, and that's not good. That's not good. And for me, it's like, well, maybe one, you should also create a better environment for your spirits so that they don't want to leave.
Mhm,
That's
yeah,
my that's my thing. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't wanna hang out in a dirty old building with paint chips all over the floor,
right,
for the rest of my afterlife.
yeah. Or
I
paranormal teams coming in and, instigating.
Yeah, oh gosh. Well, I mean, unlike what you're seeing right now, for the most part, I'm
Mhm,
fairly introverted and antisocial.
mhm,
Like, after we're done today, I'm probably not gonna talk to anybody for the rest of the day, um, unless I have to for work. Um
mm,
But for me, it's like the idea of having to tell my story or talk to people every day, especially at these
mhm,
bigger locations. Absolutely not.
right. Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, thank you.
Yeah, and that always cracks me up. People are like, "Oh, the place isn't haunted." It's like, "Well, are you sure?" It could be the spirits didn't wanna talk to you. Maybe they
Yep.
just weren't there that day because the spirits aren't stuck at a location.
Yep.
So, and, the newcomers and that's where the education comes into play.
Yep.
It all goes back to getting educated.
It goes back to education.
Um,
So,
so one of
yeah.
your most recent books, which I've yet to read, I need to make sure I get that because it's one that's on my list in my Amazon queue to
Mhm.
to get is Women of the Paranormal. What
Yeah.
inspired you to write that and what is it about?
So there's a couple things that inspired me. Well, one, when you look at the paranormal entertainment climate, there is a very specific type of person that is dominating paranormal entertainment.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a ripple effect when you have basically white guys dominating
Mhm.
television on almost every show.
Mhm.
It creates a ripple effect into the event circuit.
Right.
And then that's all who gets invited to be guests at these events. Um, but even so, when I was talking to a friend of mine about, historical people in the paranormal and who I could name off, and I was like, oh, Hans Holzer, Harry Price, Peter Underwood, and I'm like, oh, these are all men.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, okay, that can't be right. And I remembered, gosh, had to have been 2011. 2011, I was working on a presentation for my meetup group on poltergeists, and Catherine Crowe's name came up, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, it's a female. That's cool. And, Catherine Crowe wrote The Night Side of Nature. She introduced poltergeist and doppelganger into English usage. So she's a pretty inspiring person,
Mhm.
and her work set the foundation for the Society for Psychical Research. Why don't we know her name more?
Exactly.
And so that was kind of my big thing. And I think the tipping point was when I was hosting a panel at Con Carolinas about women of the paranormal,
Mhm.
and the moderator was like, name off your favorite person in the paranormal, or your favorite female in the paranormal.
Mhm.
And I was so excited. And when the mod called on me, I was like, Catherine Crowe, and crickets. And I'm like, Catherine Crowe? Catherine Crowe. you know but people didn't know who she was, and and then there were some other people like Amanda Woomer who was starting the Feminine Macabre,
Mhm.
highlighting female non-binary writers in the paranormal research circuit. And Amanda spotlights a woman of the paranormal past in every
Mhm.
book, and she wrote about Catherine Crowe too. So seeing the work of other women also highlighting women of the field was really like inspiring to me as
Right.
well. But yeah, the tipping point was Con Carolinas though,
Mhm.
and realizing, because initially I was just going to do this as a blog series, and I had 12 names, and I was like, well, I mean, if each woman is about 3,000 words, it's actually pretty good for a little novella. I'm like, that would be a
Right.
really cool little novella. But then I started doing more research, and I'm like, oh, now I'm at 20 women. Okay, now I'm at 30. Okay, now I'm at 60. Oh, God help me, But just seeing like how many women have made significant contributions in this field, and we don't know their names.
Right.
Or we use their methodologies, but we don't credit them. And I'm not
Mhm.
talking about like the Fox sisters. I mean, I'm talking about Sarah Wilson Estep, who brought the
Mhm.
classification of EVP to the United States.
Right.
Talking about Thelma Moss, who ran the parapsychology unit at UCLA, and she was Barry Taft's supervisor. You know,
Mhm.
um, so women like them who have been there. They've always been there, but their legacies have been buried, so to speak, because, either of marketing or because, they were dealing with a patriarchal society, which, in Catherine Crowe's case,
Mhm.
Violet Tweeddale, Alexandra David Neal, those women were dealing definitely with the patriarchy being the
Right.
dominant class. But yeah, there's just so much out there that I wish we could like I could introduce them to I introduce these women to
Mhm.
people, and the books seem to be the most logical way to do it.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna read it and keep an eye out on my blog for a review of it once I get to it. But this bookcase behind me is filled with books I haven't had a chance to get to read.
I
So
I hear I hear that.
they just keep piling up. And I know we talked before the show because I've seen you mention on Facebook as well that you are now one of the newest History Press authors coming out soon.
Yeah.
Which book
Yeah.
is the topic about?
Yeah, so I am writing a book about haunted places in Northern Virginia.
Mhm.
So I live in the most north of Northern Virginia. If you, it, I my apartment is right on the Potomac River, so I'm right across from Washington D.C.
Mhm.
Um, there's been a lot of content already covered about haunted places in DC. Um, so I was talking to Sam Baltrusis, and he's
Mhm.
like, I'm not really interested in reading another book about Washington, D.C., but I am interested in reading about haunted places in where you live. And I'm
Mhm.
like, Arlington? Really? And he's like, oh, yeah. And so when I was positioning it to History Press, it kind of went from a haunted places in Arlington to haunted places in Northern Virginia,
Mhm.
and covering the other areas besides like Manassas, Battlefield, and Bull Run, but like Sterling, Dulles, Reston, Occoquan.
Mhm. Yep.
That's like the very place where like our country, United States, began and planted its roots.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of really rich ghost stories of that area, and it's actually been a really great way for me to get to know the community I just moved
Yeah.
to like almost 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So
Yep. Yeah, that's like the one I'm working on right now, and I couldn't believe how many stories there are. But it's Ghosts and Legends of Florida Pirates is the one that I'm working
oh,
on
I
that's
love
coming out
that.
next summer. And holy crap, every time I research a different topic, it's like 100 different, you know,
Yeah.
it's like they want a certain word count, and I'm already over that by 20,000.
Dang. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
so
that's
it's
a pretty good dent for History Press too, because I think what's like what 40,000 words is the limit, so that's like over
yeah,
halfway there. Yeah.
right, yeah. But yeah, I mean, and you're gonna love it. I mean, they have been a pleasure to work with. I worked with an editor first out in the West Coast when I did
Hmm.
my Vegas and Nevada books, but then when we
Oh,
moved back to
nice.
Florida, the editor here and their marketing teams are amazing, and it's just they're a lot of fun to work with, and they do keep in. I mean, I'm not sure who you have as your editor, but I know mine keeps in contact with me about once a month at least, even if he doesn't hear from me.
Oh, nice, nice. That's
So
awesome.
yep, they are a lot of fun. So before we wrap things up, I know we got a little late start. Is there anything you want to make sure that we cover before we go? Any upcoming outside of your books? Any upcoming projects, events, places you're going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be at Gettysburg this weekend for Spirit Squad weekend with Sam Baltrusis. I'm
Mhm,
going to be doing my presentation on trauma and the paranormal.
mhm,
And I'm actually doing a holiday webinar next week on Monday, the spooky side of Christmas.
mhm,
So I'll be talking about holiday monsters, ghost stories of Christmas, basically making a case for why the holiday season is actually spookier than Halloween. And then I'll be at Hanover Tavern Paracon in January.
mhm.
I'm actually co-presenting with Brandon Masulo on some things, and Brandon Masulo is a very talented
Oh,
parapsychologist.
I love Brandon.
Oh, gosh, he's a wonderful human being. Um, and yeah, so I'm making an appearances at a lot of Paracons this upcoming year. So I know I'm going down to South Carolina. I'll be going to Mass Paracon. I'll be around. Follow me
Mhm,
on Facebook, Instagram,
mhm,
TikTok. Yeah, I'm around, so I'm pretty
mhm.
easy to find.
Yeah, and hopefully next year you and I can meet face to face
Yes, that'd be
outside of just on
awesome.
Facebook. I know we're always joking, like with Ghost Education 101. Philip and I have
Uh-huh.
yet to meet in person.
Oh, that's so funny.
And everybody's like, you haven't? It's like, no, we've never seen each other. And that's the way it is. That's what I love about technology nowadays. It's like
Hmm.
that with a lot of the investigators is you don't meet
Yeah,
face to face, but you're really close to them. I
yeah,
have several that I reach out to regularly with
yeah,
questions and input and all of that stuff.
yeah,
So hopefully we can definitely catch up and meet face to face and get time to sit down and have coffee and talk a little bit more about the paranormal. And
yeah.
I do know I have you scheduled. I think it's the end of January for the Women of the Paranormal show on Ghost Education 101. So that
Yeah.
is going to be a fun show. I have you, Sin Schrader Hill, Katie Foreman, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, but she's from England.
Oh,
She
nice.
will be joining as well. So we have a pretty decent panel for that one. So that is going to
Oh, that's
be
exciting.
a lot. All of us come from different walks of life, different expertise in the field, and it is
Mhm.
going to be a fun show. So I'm assuming just at the spooky stuff is all of your social media handles. You were lucky enough to
Yep.
get that all across the board.
Oh, yeah, as soon as I got the idea, I was like, "I'm not gonna use it right now, but I'm gonna reserve it." Yep,
Yep.
yep.
I know some of mine say Dr. Heather Lee, some say Heather Lee PhD. And it's like, oh, I wish I would have just gotten one.
Yeah, having one makes life so much easier.
It does. So make sure everyone checks you out, and definitely looking forward to seeing what you have planned next year, and cannot wait to read your current books that are out as well as your upcoming books.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
thank you again so much for joining us today. I hope you have a fantastic day working today.
Thanks.
And I can't believe because I was like, oh, she works during the day. I hope she has time to come
I
on.
just made sure this hour was blocked off on my calendar, and
Right.
hopefully my manager's not watching. So
Well, we've only had 5 people watching today, but most, because it's a daytime show, everybody watches
Mhm.
the replay. So if anyone has any questions on the replay, make sure you feel free to ask. I will get those to Alex so she can answer them for you. And real quick before we go, make sure you follow the show on Exploring the Paranormal Show. And you can also catch the replay on YouTube later tonight at Heather Lee PhD. And we have one more show of the season. CL Thomas is an author and paranormal researcher. She will be here with us next week. And just a reminder, we do not have any shows in December 19th or December 26th, but we return January 2nd with return guest Resnick. It's always a lot of fun talking to him about how he uses ink therapy to help with his paranormal trauma and help others with paranormal trauma as well. So again, thank you, Alex, for joining us. Definitely looking forward to chatting with you next year. You have a great day.
You too.